Hate Within, written by Aramis Brazil, that explains why Florida is teaching kids to follow white supremacists and the impact it will have on our generation. The ebook is truthful and brutal, and it is sure to make you think. Chapter 1. The Beginning of the End. The year is 2023. Florida has just passed a law requiring all public schools to teach students about white supremacy. The law is met with widespread protests, but it is ultimately upheld by the courts. The law is based on the idea that white supremacy is a legitimate form of political thought that should be taught to all students. The law's supporters argue that it is important for students to understand the history of white supremacy and its impact on American society. The law's opponents argue that it is a dangerous and irresponsible attempt to normalize white supremacy. They argue that the law will only serve to indoctrinate students into white supremacist ideology. Chapter 2. The Spread of Hate. The law in Florida is just one example of the growing trend of white supremacy in the United States. In recent years, there has been a sharp rise in hate crimes and white supremacist activity. This rise in hate is due to a number of factors, including the increasing polarization of American society, the spread of misinformation and disinformation online, and the normalization of white supremacist ideology in some circles. The spread of hate is having a devastating impact on our country. It is leading to increased violence, division, and fear. It is also making it more difficult to have honest and productive conversations about race and racism. Chapter 3. The Impact on Our Children. The impact of white supremacy on our children is particularly disturbing. Children are especially vulnerable to the influence of hate, and they are more likely to believe things that they are told by authority figures. The law in Florida will only make it easier for white supremacists to indoctrinate children into their ideology. This is a dangerous and irresponsible thing to do, and it will have a devastating impact on our children's future. Chapter 4. The Resistance. There is a growing movement of resistance to white supremacy in the United States. This movement is made up of people from all walks of life who are committed to fighting against hate and bigotry. The resistance is working to educate people about the dangers of white supremacy, to combat misinformation and disinformation, and to promote tolerance and understanding. The resistance is making a difference, but it is a long and difficult fight. Chapter 5. The Future of Our Nation. The future of our nation depends on our ability to overcome the threat of white supremacy. We must continue to educate ourselves about the dangers of hate, to combat misinformation and disinformation, and to promote tolerance and understanding. We must also be vigilant in protecting our children from the influence of white supremacy. We must teach them about the dangers of hate and bigotry, and we must help them to develop the critical thinking skills that they need to resist the lure of white supremacist ideology. The future of our nation is at stake. We must not let the hate win. Chapter 6. The End. The fight against white supremacy is a never-ending one. There will always be those who seek to divide us and to promote hatred. But we must not give up. We must continue to fight for a better future, for a future where all people are treated with dignity and respect. We must never forget the victims of white supremacy. We must never forget the pain and suffering that they have endured. And we must never stop fighting until white supremacy is defeated once and for all.
This is not a joke. This is not a game. This is real. Thank you for tuning in to Aramis Vision.